So we're starting out with this initial, what you call partisan conflict. So then the question is, how does this conflict escalate? How do the temperature rise into something like civil war, like Stasis? How do we get there? Because we're starting with partisan conflict, but then the main thing is we want to prevent
Excellent.
escalation.
Yeah, that's great. So, in Book 5 of Aristotle's Politics, as I read it, he gives this very interesting theory of why civil war happens, and he lays out sort of a very elaborate diagnostic, let's call it, for the origins of civil war. And so here's the profile. Again, this is all on my reading, but as I understand it, here's how he gives this kind of universal profile of the person who's going to start a civil war. And so there's sort of three parts to this. So first of all, he thinks that the person who raises the sword and is ready to go to war, to engage in civil war, is someone who fundamentally is motivated by the idea that the current order is unfair. It's unjust. There's something, the person's sense of equality has been violated, right? And now, there'll be different versions of that. Some people their version will be, I'm as good as anyone else, and the current regime is saying some people are better. That's not fair, and I'm going to end that. On the other hand, you might have people who say, look, I'm clearly better than other people. I'm not being treated fairly because I'm just being treated like any garden variety, like anyone else. But in both cases, the person is going to have this feeling of they haven't been treated fairly by the regime, right? So that's the kind of first part. Is the person's drawing the sword, and that's going to be the thing they're thinking about. Now, Aristotle thinks that the immediate reason they will have drawn their sword, this is what I call the trigger for civil war, will be that they will have witnessed some kind of honor or dishonor or some kind of penalty or reward being given to someone that where they see it happen and they think, you know what, this is the last straw. I just can't handle this anymore. If that person over there is getting that monetary reward, well, that's it. I've had it. I'm now going to, that's my tripwire. I'm now going to draw my sword and start fighting. So the triggers, Aristotle thinks, always come in the form of money or honor involving you or your friends in one way or the other. But then maybe the third part of his analysis, and this is really where your question comes, is Aristotle thinks that it takes a lot to get a human being to the point where they're just a trigger event away from drawing their sword and being motivated by the sense of fairness. It takes a lot to get a person to that state. And so he outlines a number of things that I call spectacles. That is, things you see over time that slowly lead you to the conclusion that the constitutional order in which you're living is fundamentally erroneous and fundamentally unjust. And what I love about Aristotle is there's no silver bullet here. There's no one causal factor that does this. Aristotle just identifies a whole bunch of different kinds of things that over time can add up to making you think that this place needs to be burned down. And so there's 7 of them. And here it is real quickly. It's that you see spectacles where people are making profit. They're getting money in some way. You see another spectacle is you see certain people winning awards or honors that strikes you as unjust. Another spectacle is that you see people in ruling positions that make you afraid, that make you fearful. Another is that you see people in ruling positions that you think that you're superior to. Another spectacle is you see people in ruling positions that you think are ludicrous and you have contempt for them. And then finally, Aristotle thinks is that you look out at your society and you see that the other side is growing too quickly, right? And so this is especially true, Aristotle thinks, when rich people, the oligarchs, look out and they see huge numbers of poor people increasing. So they feel like as a proportion of society, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the number of poor is getting larger and larger and larger. And so that their sense of their relative size, uh, that will, it's one of those spectacles they see that will start to put them on edge. So anyway, there's never for Aristotle one root cause of civil war or stasis. Just the history of any given city might be a little different than the history of other cities. But in general, what you have is human beings who see these spectacles, and they just over time add up until the person is more and more agitated that the regime they're living in is basically unfair. And then some triggering event happens that finally makes them decide to initiate civil war. So anyway, I'm sorry that answer went on for so long. But as I understand it, he really does try to lay out kind of a global theory of the factionalizer, the person who engages in civil war. And he designs that theory in a way where that theory will accommodate a virtuous person who goes to civil war against a vicious regime. But this theory also will accommodate civil wars where there's no virtuous people involved, where it'll be different kinds of partisans warring on each other. But his theory will explain both those kind of situations.
I mean, when you were laying out the reasons and the things, so many just light bulbs went off in my head about modern day phenomenon, the things that really trigger people. In I'm thinking about the U.S. That trigger people in the U.S. today, with people getting things that they feel like don't deserve them, or them leaping ahead, or
Yep,
people feeling like the people in power are not very smart or not very intelligent. there's
absolutely.
there's so many things that I feel like could be applicable to our modern time. So